Okay, we're back from 4th of July.
Yes.
It was a very nice trip, but obviously some heavy stories. And we're going to cover something we don't usually do. We're going to basically cover one story today. We'll have a couple stories, but mainly one.
Right.
Because of what's going on with the flooding in Texas. I want to talk about that story, how it's being covered, some of the politicalization of the story. Politicization. Yeah, politicization.
Okay.
Of the story, which is disgusting and not true. And so we'll go through this in detail because in stories like floods, number one, it's very applicable to what happens in New Mexico. Flooding is one of our most dangerous natural disasters. It's what you're most likely to have a problem with outside of lightning, which wouldn't in and of itself isn't a disaster. But flooding, with the way the monsoon flow works and things like that, it's a major risk in this state. And so what happened in Texas is something we can learn from to some degree. And I want to talk about what's going on with the Weather Service, what kind of job they did. I spent 25 years on calls with the Weather Service with severe events. And a lot of what happened in this event, I think people don't totally realize. And I think that some truth needs to be told here on what's going on. And so that's what we're going to do.
Okay. Well, we'll get right to that, but let's get to a few comments really fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because we did have a pretty popular show last week talking about mainly the big, beautiful bill, which, by the way, I guess I need to give props to you because I did not see that thing getting signed before the 4th of July.
That's right. I'll take apologies.
You did.
Yeah.
So tip of the cap to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It definitely was something I felt like was going to be signed, had to be signed, and was signed. Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I said, I didn't see that coming. I thought it would take a few weeks, but a little tip to you. Okay. So we did this. We did a survey, or we reported on a survey that had been done about "Are you proud to be an American?" For our 4th of July episode. So if you haven't got to see that, you can go back and watch that. But here's a comment coming in from that. From Desert Guy, he says, "I'm very proud to be an American right now. I'm a Democrat, Hispanic. Voted for Trump and voted for you, Ronchetti. Yes,
Whoa.
I know you may have found a unicorn."
What?
Well, here's the thing. You're not a unicorn because there's plenty of Democrats that voted for Mark that were also Hispanic. But we welcome you to the party.
It's very cool.
Thank you, Desert Guy, for writing in.
Yeah.
Billy Bisbee says, "Love the patriotism. Love game day." Because, again, we're doing game day videos. Question. Okay, so here's a weather question for you, Mark.
Yeah.
Since the monsoon is starting, with the technology we have today, why can't they use GPS to put the weather station at the geographical center of the city and not at the Sunport? The totals from the Sunport totals seem to always differ largely to what happens in the city.
Yeah, so the Sunport is where the National Weather Service is located. So that's where all the basically they do the balloon launches from there and everything. So it's all centralized there. It's true. We don't get quite as much moisture at the Sunport as we do in most other parts of the city. Not necessarily downtown, but there's a huge disparity between what happens at the Sunport and what happens in the Heights, for example, a massive disparity. And so that is very true. So when you start looking at some of the numbers and you say, does Albuquerque really only get 9 inches of rain a year? If you're up in the Heights and foothills, you get more than that, right? And so still, though, I understand the point, but you have to have a centralized location. Now, there are some other weather spots and locations and weather machinery we have in different places around the city that you can tap into. But for the most part, you need to have a standard place. If you start moving your location, you then take the data that you've been collecting for years and you make it obsolete, if you know what I'm saying. So in other words, if we started and said, you know what, we're going to move our weather reporting site to Tramway and I-25, right? That would be a totally different set of data. And all of a sudden you'd look back and you'd say, oh my gosh, our precipitation has gone up in Albuquerque, 40% over the past 20 years. That's because you've moved the site. So what you try to do is keep it in that location. But I would agree. I think that the Sunport, not necessarily a great location for an accurate look, especially at what happens to precipitation, because it is a pretty dry spot in the city.
Okay, but you also, like when you were forecasting the weather on the news, you did a really good job of doing all the different regions and kind of talking about those differences. So
yeah, and a little less so in the city, but yeah, and you have to talk about it. So for example, when we talk about, and this gets back to what we're going to talk about today, predicting precipitation amounts, the single hardest thing to do in meteorology is to be able to say, how much snow are you going to get? How much rain are you going to get? It is the single most difficult thing to do. And I know it's not the popular thing to say, but good meteorology is a highly educated guess about what's going to happen. And so that's the truth. And the fact of the matter is, most of the time, it's done very well by the people who do it, including here in Albuquerque at the NWS and the NWS in Texas that was responsible for what they had to be.
Okay, we'll get more into that. Okay, here's a question for us regarding the Big Beautiful Bill. This is from Laura McAllister. Says, okay, I'm trying to get a grip on the Big Beautiful Bill. No one is really clear about how it's going to affect us in New Mexico. Say somebody's making $60,000 a year. Where is the impact, and can you do a show where things are simplified, please? No time for a big show on this. We've already done a lot on the Big Beautiful Bill and it's passed, but just some nuts and bolts on this. I'm going to let you answer this, but I mean, I know the biggest thing that I'm watching this, and one of the biggest pushes for this was to keep those Trump cuts, tax cuts permanent. So you've already benefited if you're making $60,000 a year. Those tax cuts are now permanent. So add a little bit more to that.
Well, right. And I think one thing that's underappreciated about the 2017 tax cuts were the biggest benefit went to lower income and middle income Americans. It just did. It's a fact. You can go look at the numbers. So let's say they had not passed the bill. Let's say that it didn't pass, and all of a sudden, all the pushback on it worked from the other side and from some Republicans, and it didn't work. You would have largely seen tax increases above what you're paying right now of $2,000 to $3,000 for a family that makes $60,000 a year. That would have happened. So you would have looked at a massive tax increase. That would have likely pushed our growth down to zero or could have pushed us into recession. So a lot of this is protecting the current circumstances that we have as far as what you take home. Also, the corporate tax rates that were up in the mid-30s for countries, some of the highest tax rates in the world were here for corporate tax rates. Those came down and allowed for the economy to continue to grow, and that's going to continue as well. That's important stuff. And so especially if you own a business and you're able to be sure that you're not going to see a massive increase in your taxes coming up. So all those things will help. A lot of the individual stuff is the tax structure that we currently have not being disturbed and pushed back up again. Right. And so that does that. And then you start to look at some of the other things that are going to be part of this bill. What's going to happen with Medicare and Medicaid, especially Medicaid. Are people going to get kicked off Medicaid? Basically, all that's happening with that is there's going to be a work requirement that you have to be trying to get a job. Okay. That's something that, what's his? Oh, Bill Clinton. Passed, right. Okay. So this is something that just says, hey, look, you got to make sure you're either trying to get a job or you have a job to continue to take advantage of these benefits. Again, this is not over the top, but what this illustrates, though, is that once you get into politics now and the other side just goes crazy, whatever the issue is, it's going to be very difficult for anyone in this country of either party or of any party to cut spending and get our debt under control, because the other side will go and look at them and say, you're cutting benefits for people who need them. And I'll tell you what, I think what this shows is that as a country, if we don't get both parties on board with getting spending under control at the same time, we're going to have to go over a cliff. And then all of a sudden, you're going to be putting back together again an economy that will be in pieces.
Yeah, which is dangerous. Another thing, too, just to keep in mind that we've kind of talked about this, too, is, all the fear mongering of, this is going to close down our rural hospitals. This is going to kill your Medicaid. We're going to leave these starving babies. All this. I mean, I've seen everybody.
SNAP benefits, all the whole deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen everybody from Senator Warren all the way to local officials here. Just, here's the thing. We're going to find out real quickly. So if all their fear mongering is true, well, then Trump's an epic failure, and we'll all know it before the midterms. Okay. Yeah. But right now, what has been proposed and what has been suggested with this bill and what has been laid out in this bill is those things will not happen. Another conversation I got into with the gentleman on X this past week was he just said, those rural hospital funding that got put back in, because there was $25 billion originally allocated for rural hospitals. Another $25 billion was added back in. So $50 billion total has been allocated for rural hospital support protections federally. So he's like, this will only benefit Alaska hospitals. That's just not true.
$50 billion for Alaska
Exactly.
hospitals.
I was like, sir.
Every rural hospital in Alaska gets $1 billion.
I was like, sir, it's federally. So again, it's like, pay attention. We'll find out, I guess.
No, your point is exactly right, which is if we're sitting here a year from now and you have massive amounts of people that have been kicked off of Medicaid that are working hard and are playing by the rules, and if you have rural hospitals shutting down everywhere, then you will know that the opposition was right. And if they're wrong, then hold them to account. Realize that when they start telling you things that are going to happen for sure, people are dying, then hold them to that. And if they're right, then they're right. Sometimes people say things are going to go badly, and they do. Sometimes when you spend massive amounts of money after you've already stimulated the economy with COVID dollars, you're going to lead to inflation. Turns out that happened, right? I mean, everybody said it was going to happen, and Biden did it anyway, and it happened. And the prices skyrocketed, and we haven't, seen them come down since, really. The rate of increase has gone down, but still. So that's the point. So sometimes politicians and political parties step in it, and the other party says this is going to be a disaster, and it is. Other times sometimes these parties say it's going to be a disaster, and it never is. Right. So you just have to wait and see.
Right. So we'll check it out. And also just another point that somebody didn't make, I didn't put the comment in here, is rural hospitals closing down in New Mexico are happening anyway, largely due to a loss of doctors.
Yeah, right.
So
exactly.
Keep that in mind too, that there's an issue as well. Okay. Yes. Just one more comment that we put in here. Elizabeth Carlisle, God bless America, and those who gave their lives to keep us free. Another great show. Thank you, Elizabeth. That is an amen from us as well. So thank you all again to our servicemen and women out there. We appreciate that. Okay. So getting to this really heartbreaking story that kind of shook the whole country on July 4th is this flooding in Central Texas. It's right now, currently, as of Monday when we're recording, death toll in Central Texas flash flood rises to 82. As the sheriff says, about 10 campers plus one counselor on top of that is still missing. We have 28 children, 80 people so far that have died from this historic flash flooding in Central Texas. So
right.
Just
heartbreaking along the Guadalupe River, right?
Right.
Okay, and so right out of the chute, what you see here is legacy media, and we'll get to just a couple of these. I'm going to spend a lot of time on it, and then I'll let you get into your in-depth story. We're gonna take the criticisms first. We're gonna line them all up, and then I'm going to tell you why most of them are complete garbage. Okay? So here we go. George Stephanopoulos starts off the festivities, as only George can, as biased as possible, and leading into his question with the reporter who's on the scene in Texas.
Maria, we're also learning that there were significant staffing shortfalls at the National Weather Service's offices in the region.
George, as of right now, the local county officials really didn't want to address that just yet. What they are telling us is they expected between 4 and 6 inches of rain. That is what weather experts told them, the National Weather Service as well. They also knew that in remote locations, they might get anywhere from 8 to 10 inches. But this amount of rain in such a short amount of time.
Okay, so Stephanopoulos tries to frame this as, we didn't have any meteorologists warning anybody, nobody had any idea. And so this is all Trump's fault because he was cutting overall weather staff or giving people a chance to retire early. Okay.
You think that George would have learned his lesson after losing a massive lawsuit?
Well, it's just classic, right? Has nothing to do with what happened here, and he's actually wrong. But still, and then you hear her say, well, they didn't predict this, and they said, well, only up to 10 inches of rain. 10 inches of rain in one of the most flood-prone areas of the country. So we'll get to that too. Okay. And so, but that's that. And then Chris Murphy tweets this: accurate weather forecasting helps avoid fatal disasters. There are consequences to Trump's brainless attacks on public workers like meteorologists. Okay, give me a break. Okay, give me a break. We have 4,000 people at the Weather Service, and some of them are going to end up retiring early, and they're going to hire some people back. Again, they have enough meteorologists. Don't get me wrong. We have to make sure we have the proper funding for modeling and everything like that. And what I mean by modeling is modeling what the atmosphere is going to do. That takes a tremendous amount of investment. So we'll set that aside for now, and we'll get to more of it. But really, it was the New York Times that dove in and decided to just go full hog. Like, let's not address the issues here. Let's turn this political as quickly as possible. And so that's what you're going to point out.
Yeah, so here is the headline. It says, as floods hit, key roles were vacant at Weather Service offices in Texas. Some experts say staff shortages might have complicated forecasters' ability to coordinate responses with local emergency management officials.
By the way, quickly, just even that sub-headline, how many qualifiers? Some experts say staff shortages might have complicated.
Right.
This whole thing is garbage, but go ahead.
Okay, so basically they're going to blame that these unfilled positions led to the flood deaths. Okay, so here's a couple of polls for this. The shortages are among the factors likely to be scrutinized as the death toll climbs from the floods. Separate questions have emerged about the preparedness of local communities, including Kerr County's apparent lack of local flood warning system. The county, roughly 50 miles northwest of San Antonio, is where many of the deaths occurred. Okay, we go on here. Now, this is what kind of it starts to lay out.
Right.
Where are they getting their quotes from? Well, it's a union spokesperson. Okay.
Meaning, public sector union work. Yeah. So it's this guy's job to get as many employees as possible and talk up their end of things. And so you're not talking about somebody from the Weather Service who's actually working day to day on these issues. That's not who this person is, by the way.
Right. Okay. So it says here the National Weather Service's San Angelo office, which is responsible for some of the areas hit hardest by Friday's flooding, was missing a senior hydrologist, staff forecaster, and meteorologist in charge, according to Tom Fahey, the legislative director for the National Weather Service Employee Organization, which is the union that represents weather service workers. The Weather Service's nearby San Antonio office, which covers other areas hit by the floods, also had significant vacancies, including a warning coordination meteorologist and a science officer, Mr. Fahey said. Staff members in these positions are meant to work with local emergency managers to plan for floods, including when and how to warn local residents and help them evacuate. So Mr. Fahey seems to think there's staff shortages.
Well, right. And so he's like, because Fred, the hydrologist, took an early retirement, nobody was there to forecast the storm.
Nobody.
They're just like, nobody's here today. I mean, go look in the office. There's zero. There's nobody here. Okay, well, let's keep going.
Okay, so here we go. This is kind of where they start to come in on Trump's administration pretty hard. That office's warning coordination meteorologist left on April 30th after taking the early retirement package that the Trump administration used to reduce the number of federal employees, according to a person with knowledge of his departure. Some of the openings may predate the current Trump administration.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. But at both offices, the vacancy rate is roughly double what it was when Mr. Trump returned to the White House in January, according to Mr. Fahey.
Okay, so we get the idea of this article, right? So it is they didn't have enough people there. Mm-hmm. So their qualifying language is might, will require scrutiny, stuff like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, let me just tell you.
Hold on, let me add you one more thing because I think this is important for what you're going to say.
Okay.
It's the very last poll here on clip 11, Ava. It says, really, they're coming out and saying, well, there wasn't enough coordination between the NWA and NWS, and the emergency management team there in these counties. Okay, that's what they're blaming now. So here's a poll that just says this. Typically, this is a guy that was quoted earlier in the article. Mr. Sokich said the Weather Service will send an official to meet regularly with local emergency managers for what are called, quote, tabletop operations, which is planning ahead of time for what to do in a case of a flash flood or other major weather disasters. So does this article say that those meetings took place?
Or did not take place?
Okay. Well, lo and behold, they did not. There's no mention of it.
They just say usually you would meet and try to make sure there's a good relationship. And by the way, so let me just say this first and foremost. There are a few issues that I've been in the middle of more closely than this. Okay, as a television meteorologist, you have very close coordination with the National Weather Service if you're doing it right. Okay, so when they talk about these tabletop meetings, the NWS comes in and talks to meteorologists as well that work in the market, that do it all the time. And so in this particular case, what you tend to see is a good relationship between the people that work for the counties and the National Weather Service. That relationship did exist in Texas at the time. Not only that, when you get ready for a big storm that comes in, and I don't care if you're in New Mexico, Texas, California, it doesn't matter. Most of the time, the National Weather Service will set up a call for everyone to get on that call and say, hey, we got a serious storm coming in. It happens 4 or 5 times a year in New Mexico. Most of the time, it's a winter storm that comes in. So if you've got a big time storm coming in, we know we're going to get a few feet of snow in the northern mountains. We may get 6 inches in Albuquerque. We'll be on the phone with the National Weather Service on a call two-ish days before it happens. It happens all the time. They coordinate it all the time. So you say to yourself, did that happen in this case? In fact, it did. So let's go through, first of all, just to blow out some of the thought process here that there was no coordination or that this stuff did not happen, okay? Number one, let's go to the tweets. Now, these are tweets from Homeland Security, and this is backed up by the actual TikTok that was, and I don't mean TikTok from the TikTok app. I mean the TikTok that was released by the Weather Service on the information that they gave out. On the morning of July 3rd, 36 hours before this happened, the Weather Service had a forecast briefing that was open to all of these counties saying, look, we think we got some serious flash flood risks, okay? Big time. So they had that call. And so not only that, they then go through and they lay out the time frame. In the morning of July 3rd, National Weather Service issues a flood hazard outlook. So you're looking at all these hazard outlooks. You pull them down. If you're in the county, you're looking at all of these things if you're smart, if you're doing your job. Okay, and you're looking at all these saying, all right, we got a real problem around Kerrville. Now they know you live in Kerrville. You know you are in one of the most dangerous corridors for floods in the country. Okay, so this is not stuff that is new to them. All right, 1:18 p.m. on the 3rd. Again, well ahead of when all this occurred by at least 12 hours or so. We're at the NWS issues a flood watch for Kerr County effective through Friday morning. 6:10, Weather Prediction Center issues first of 3 mesoscale precipitation discussions, warning of excessive rainfall and flash flood potential. Again, so right now, this is the stuff where the Weather Service is telling you with bright flashing lights, we've got problems here. And if your job in the county is to keep an eye on these things, knowing on July 4th, you have a massive amount of people around, you've got to be really careful. You keep on going. You go into the nighttime hours, and we go to 6:22, right?
National Weather Center or Water Center?
Water Center, yeah.
Water Center warns of considerable flooding risks north and west of San Antonio, including Kerrville.
Okay, so at this point, by the way, if they were paying attention the way the county should have been, they should have been clearing people out.
Right.
By the way.
Evacuating on July 3rd.
Yes, and by this whole thought of, well, they only predicted 4 to 8 inches of rain, maybe 10 inches of rain. 10 inches of rain? Like you'd flood out these places with 10 inches of rain easily. So anyway, keep going.
At 11:41 p.m. on July 3rd, flash flood warning issued from Bandera County.
Yeah.
And then again at 1:14 a.m. on July 14th. So now we've got July 4th. We've now moved into July 4th.
Yep.
Flash flood warning with, quote, considerable tag issued for Bandera and Kerr counties, triggering wireless emergency alerts, WEAs, and NOAA weather radio notifications.
Meaning your phone goes off.
Right.
Just so you know. So that's what starts to happen there. Okay, keep going.
And then at 4:03 a.m. on July 4th, flash flood warning upgraded to flash flood emergency for South Central Kerr County.
Flash flood emergency is you could die if you're in this area. Get out. That's as serious as it gets.
And then at 4:34, again on July 4th, Kerr County Sheriff's Office reports flooding at low water crossings, 201 minutes, over 3 hours after the 1:14 a.m. warning.
Right. Okay, and then it keeps going down. So we'll let that go. Now, another thing I want you to know. So
but here, like this one's important, the last one. The National Weather Service provided over 12 hours of advanced notice via the flood watch and over 3 hours of lead time for flash flood warnings with escalated alerts as the storms intensify.
Right. And I think it's very easy for these county officials, and this is what's happening. These county officials saying the Weather Service, they didn't do their job. They didn't do what they should have done. And then the politicians are going in, well, the Weather Service didn't do their job because Trump cut them. It's not true. None of it is true. Okay, so we're going to keep going through this. So you have the briefing. Okay, you have that briefing that goes in the morning. I said it was 36 hours in advance. It was about 18 hours in advance. You had that briefing. Okay, so you had an 18-hour advance briefing. So you were on the phone with the Weather Service. They're telling you how concerned they are. Then every single one of these county managers and everybody in that area has access to basically a Slack channel. Okay. And what that is it's basically a discussion board from the Weather Service where they tell you what's going on minute by minute as they're forecasting. So throughout the day on the 3rd, throughout the day on the 4th, you literally are in conversation with the National Weather Service, and they're telling you what's going on. They're telling you, hey, here's what our models are telling us. Here's what's happening. This is not a lack of communication. Okay. It isn't. They have those channels open and they use them. Okay. And so that stuff is critical. And so the other point was, oh my gosh, the staff has been cut. The staff has been cut. Usually, most weather services, and it's the same thing here in Albuquerque, on a normal shift, you have 2 meteorologists who write your discussions, who do your forecast, who are in charge. That night, there were 5. There were 5 people on staff working that night.
Because they called in extra. This thing.
Of course they did, because they knew. So to say that they didn't have the proper staffing, also not true. Okay, so the staffing was there. They got the word out as best they could. Now, there are reasons that there were some massive loss of life here, and we're going to get into those. But I also want to address the issue where people say it's climate change. Here we go. They got the 2 things. Trump cut it, and then there's climate change. That's why this happened. Okay, so here is a look at the flow increases at the Guadalupe River at Hunt. I picked the one here. This is the only record, by the way. This was a record for Hunt, and it was at 29 feet or so, okay? By the way, let's just go through the other areas you talked about. We talked about Kerrville, right? And let's go to Kerrville. Okay, let's go to Kerrville's numbers. The next one, there you go. So let's go to Kerrville. It crested at 23.4 feet. That's the third highest on record. By the way, the highest on record was in 1932, where they were at 39 feet. Okay, Center Point, they topped out at 21.41 feet. The record is 24.27 feet from 1978. Comfort, 34.76 feet. Their record was actually 42.3 feet. Chris Martz put these numbers together. And by the way, that was at 1869. Okay, so these are not the highest numbers we've ever seen. We could even go back to Spring Branch as well, at the very bottom there. Okay, they topped out at 29.33 feet. Their record is 53 feet.
And that was in 1869.
And that was in 1869.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are not things that don't happen here. They happen here regularly. Okay. So I want you to fix that in your head too, that this area of Texas, these things happen regularly. So I want to start with the 5 factors or hit the 5 factors of why this happened. Okay. Because I just can't stand to watch what I spent a career in, people taking it, twisting it, and politicizing it without knowing what they're talking about. So the question becomes, and you even heard some of these people, I know you referenced some of this, and it was some of these county guys saying, well, they never told us anywhere near this kind of rain.
Right. Yeah. That's what that was happening at a press conference with the governor's office there in Texas. You had emergency management guys get up and saying, well, nobody said that we were going to get this kind of rain.
Well, okay. They told you were going to get in excess of 7 inches of rain, and you are in one of the worst flood zones in the country. That enough should have you sounding the alarm bell to everybody. But the fact that it was double that, I want to explain why. So Ava, let's put this into motion. And this is going to get a little technical, but I want you guys to just look at something. You know, Ava, just mic up for a second here. And just what I want to show you is, and I couldn't find a graphic that shows all this, but I want to see if you guys can pick up on this. You can see where that big explosion of precipitation is, right? All right, we're going to go through this again, and it's going to run again. And what I want you to watch for is see the moisture start to increase here and the rain start to increase. See it backing to the west. It's going to move to the west, and you're going to see some twisting in the moisture here and in the rain and thunderstorms. So you see it there blowing up, and see it twisting right there. See it twist right there, right there, and it sort of backs up. Yeah. Okay, so what happened is this: most storms that come in move west to east, right? They come from California or the Pacific Northwest, and they come through New Mexico and then go to Texas, right? Okay, so this is what's called a mesoscale convective vortex. Okay, it's a tiny little storm. It's a little low pressure system. But this one, instead of going west to east, it went east to west. So it backed up. It's called retrograding. Okay, so it's a little low pressure system, which is like a little vacuum cleaner. Okay, the little vacuum cleaner goes from central Texas a little further to the west. It then runs into the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry. Okay, so you have a ton of moisture. You've got your little weather disturbance creeping from back east to see it back now. It kind of backs up to the west, spins right there. See the spinning?
Yeah.
And then it blows up. Okay. Now, the reason I bring this up and the reason I bring up a mesoscale convective vortex, it's something that most meteorologists are very familiar with, okay? But these are tricky. They're small, and it's hard for weather models to grasp them, right? It's very difficult to be able to tell exactly how much rain you're going to get out of a mesoscale convective vortex or an MCC, any of them, okay? It's tricky. But the point being on this one is you have Barry's moisture comes up, you have that little low that comes over it, draws that moisture up, and then you have the hill country. The hill country is higher elevation. If you put moisture over higher elevation, that dumps heavier rain too. So I'm just telling you, this is a tricky thing to forecast. So by them going in and saying it's possible we could get 7, 8, 9 inches of rain.
They actually said 10.
Yeah,
they did warn.
Yeah. That's off the charts a problem. And then this goes and gives you 15 in some areas because of these things happening. Again, you get that little disturbance, you get that deep moisture, boom, it blows up over a flood-prone area. This is something that has happened before, okay? Climate change does not lead to more MCVs. It doesn't, okay? Decaying tropical systems are not because of climate change. We've always had them. Okay, so this is not a climate change issue. This is an issue of a difficult to forecast piece of a weather system coming in, a little small low pressure system, along with a ton of moisture coming up from the south and a topography that is not made for this. So that's why that happened. It's not because of climate change. Even an additional couple of degrees on the temperature doesn't make this that, right? They don't add up. So there's a very specific reason this was tough to forecast. But telling the Weather Service they failed because they told you you're going to get 8, 9 inches and you got 15? No, I'm sorry. This is not, meteorology is not clairvoyance. You don't get to know ahead of time everything. They did a good job of telling you the area to watch out for. And the area to watch out for is an area that's well known to flood. So reason number 1, difficult weather system to go ahead and lay out exactly how it's going to go. Okay?
Yeah, and then number 2, let's not forget this. The Texas Hill Country, that this whole area, it has a nickname, and it's a scary nickname. It's literally called Flash Flood Alley.
Yep.
So, and to explain that a little bit, like obviously this is not the first time we've seen this kind of storms, but when you come in and it's called the Flash Flood Alley.
Yeah, right?
It's pretty scary. And here's a little
yeah,
poll.
so this is from what you're about to read comes from Roger Pelkey, and he's a meteorologist, very smart guy. Okay, and he worries, he does a really good job of laying out the facts, but he lays out very clearly what the problem is in this area when you add heavy rain.
Okay, so he says here, this is a 2022 article that he published in AccuWeather, I believe. It says fairly regular flash floods have led officials to nickname a part of the state Flash Flood Alley, a geographic region that tracks through many of Texas' major metropolitan areas, including San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, and Waco. Balcones.
Yeah, the Balcones.
Escarpment, which roughly parallels Interstate 35, marks the location of Flash Flood Alley. The inactive fault zone formed a rise in the topography in the area, which enhances storm systems that pass over it, causing them to dump more rain there than they might elsewhere, which is what you just kind of talked about. We're going from the coastal plains right into the hill country. There's a rise of at least about 500 feet in elevation. Pete Rose, a meteorologist from the Lower Colorado River Authority, told AccuWeather national reporter Bill Waddell. Along with that, you have a lot of your hills and valleys that go along with that type of topography. And these hills also don't contain a lot of soil, which I think is a very key fact. They have very thin soil. So when the rain does hit them, not much of it gets absorbed. In fact, I read an article that calls it kind of like cement almost. It's like concrete.
That's right. It is like raining on top of an arroyo. Really, if you want an Albuquerque example, nothing soaks into the arroyo, the ones that are basically concrete, right? It hits the arroyo and goes, right? And that's what happens here. So 2 things, right? So you've got the Texas Hill Country, moisture goes above it, you dump extra rain because you cool it, and it dumps the rain. And then you get that really hard either rock below or soils which don't absorb any of that, and it comes flowing down. So that's number 2. That's reason number 2. We got a tricky storm, and then we've got an area that is absolutely prone to this sort of thing. In fact, let's go back to 1978. This has happened before.
Yes, this is terrible. Back in 1978, Kerr County and surrounding Kerr County. There you go. Kerr County and surrounding areas, especially Kerrville and Comfort, Texas. This was the torrential rainfall that caused the Guadalupe River to rise rapidly and resulting in flash floods. Here's the impact of this. 27 fatalities, dozens injured, hundreds of campers stranded or swept away, and over 40 mobile homes destroyed. National Guard and helicopters were deployed for the rescue efforts as well.
And you're looking at the video of it right here. So this takes us back to 1978, a massive issue here. Similar situation. There's actually a better comparison than this one even was, but still 27 people dying there when you had a tremendous amount of rain. Yes, you had to get kids out of these camps along the river. Okay, this is something that's been going on here for decades. And this will get back to one of our other real problems in this whole thing. But it's not just 1978.
Yeah, there's another 1987 in the same area. 10 people died. Again, it's in the same areas. They were swept away. This was 12 inches of rain that fell rapidly over the same area. Guadalupe River rise. The river surged by more than 20 feet in a matter of hours. And
by the way, 10 children died at a camp.
Right.
So exactly the situation we're looking at here. They had to go in there with the National Guard, try to get him out. This guy you're seeing on the video, he was one of the first people that was rescued from this thing. And they came running out, try to solve this. But again, notice what's going on when this is going down. It's daylight, right? Okay. So they're checking. So that's, again, so this is not new to this area. It happens far too often. For this area.
Is the third in 45 years.
That's right. So the question is, if you knew this and you're looking at this video from 1987, You're looking at the video from 1978. You're looking at the video from 2025. Why in the world did they not have a warning system?
Right. And to explain that a little bit, like a warning system in a lot of tornado areas, right? Those sirens go off in a tornado area, right? So the complaint is, why do they not have this along the Guadalupe River area, right? That's kind of been the big complaint about this.
Right.
My understanding is this is a pretty expensive system that would have had been put in, correct?
Well, yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, I think you'd have to put in, it'd be similar to if you're in Hawaii and you have the tsunami warning system it'd have to be a verbal site. You'd have to be able to hear it, right? I mean, and so in the middle of the night, that would go off and you would do it. But I don't know how many people you have to lose in these things before you decide to do it.
Right.
But I mean, and you look at some of these, I mean, you still look at this video. Again, this is video from 30 years ago that this stuff's been happening, right? So this is nothing new. And for them not to have any sort of system, or when they know they're getting 7 to 10 inches of rain, for them to even allow anyone along this river around Kerrville and around where Camp Mystic is, they shouldn't have been allowed in there. It should not have happened.
They should have just shut this thing down.
They should have shut it down.
And just so you know, I did read a little bit about these systems that I guess it was proposed a while back to add these systems, and then it just kind of didn't get very far. I think the taxes were going to have to be increased, things like that. It just didn't get off the ground. They didn't get this. They didn't get the permissions granted that they needed to put these systems in place.
I agree, but then this is on your leaders to understand history and understand the situation and understand what's going on, and understanding. And this is reason number 4. Understanding the weekend. This is July 4th. The July 4th weekend, one of the busiest weekends possible. So when we look and say, why did so many people die? So many people died because there's one other bigger reason than that, but still the July 4th weekend packed along that river. And I get it. There's a lot of pushback that you would have gotten if you'd said, you got to back away from this. Or you got to go to everybody along that river and say, you guys, tonight is going to be really dangerous. If you stay here, I think you're making a mistake. But if you do, you need to keep your phones on and realize that if something goes down, people need to be able to get a hold of you, and the Weather Service needs to be able to alert your phone. Any of those things, none of them. And I think that's a failure of leadership to some degree on the people that in these counties. It's not a failure of the Weather Service. It really is not. And the last reason, and to me, probably the biggest reason, it happened at night. It happened in the middle of the night. People are asleep, and you're literally watching video of a house and a cabin flowing down a river. Mm-hmm. They had no idea. So they go to sleep with very dangerous weather conditions in place. And then by the time they realize what's happened, it's too late. And that you can't do. And don't blame this on climate change, and don't blame this on Donald Trump, and don't politicize it. It's disgusting. And I can't let it go. I just see it and I'm infuriated. I'm infuriated with county officials who didn't do their job. And I'm infuriated with people that say the Weather Service didn't get it right. Infuriated with politicians who would rather score points than understand the situation and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because if we just make this all political, I'm not going to solve anything. Oh, so Donald Trump's not president, so this won't happen next time. Oh, bull. Give me a break. And so you see this, and you see everything that happens. And I want to end this little discussion with an article from the Wall Street Journal that lays out how just heartbreaking this is, and how honestly helpless so many victims were. And so it's an article that's titled, "The Texas Dad Tried to Kayak to His Daughters. The Girls Texted, I Love You." So here we go. The Harbor family was spending the holiday at a cabin they owned at the Casa Bonita cabin community near Hunt, Texas. Around 3:30 a.m. on Friday, July 4th, R.J. Harbor was awakened by pounding rain, thunder, and lightning. Hours earlier, he had received flash flood warnings for other areas, but not where he was staying. R.J., a 45-year-old father and Dallas lawyer, had been vacationing and going to summer camp in the area his whole life. Thought the river might rise a little, he said. He wanted to check on his own 2 young daughters, 11-year-old Brooke and 13-year-old Blair. The girls were staying in a borrowed cabin closer to the river with their grandparents, Mike and Charlene Harbor. RJ said he thought he would clear away the kayak and some fishing gear down by the river. He put his foot down on the floor of the cabin. He felt about 4 inches of water. RJ turned to his wife, who was laying in bed beside him, also awake. He told her, "Annie, the cabin's flooding." RJ could see water rushing through the front door. He tried to open the door, but he couldn't. He looked out the window, where he saw water levels about 2 feet below the window. "We need to get out of here right now," RJ told Annie. He grabbed a few items, their cell phones and a bag they hadn't unpacked. By the time they jumped out the window 2 minutes later, the water had reached up to Annie's neck. The Harbors hurried to another cabin nearby, only slightly on higher ground. They knocked on the door and woke up the family. By the time the family came to the door, the water was almost at their door. They went to another cabin and woke a third family as well. RJ borrowed a kayak, life vest, and a flashlight. He started to kayak to the cabin where the couple's daughters and RJ's parents were staying. It was about 100 feet below, and he reached about halfway when RJ said the swell knocked him into a post. I shined the flashlight out there, and I could see it was all white water, and I've kayaked enough to know that that was going to be impossible. He could see an entire cabin had been detached from its foundation and was stuck against the side of the cabin where his daughters and parents were staying. There were cars floating at me and trees floating at me. I knew if I took even one more stroke further, it was going to be a death sentence. RJ turned around to get his wife and the remaining family. They went to a home nearby on higher ground across Highway 39, where the family had let them in around 3:45 a.m. That's when he checked his cell phone. And he saw a text sent at 3:30 a.m. from his daughter, Brooke. Receiving the text alone was a miracle in the area, where he usually couldn't get any cell service. It said, "I love you." Annie, 43, who worked at St. Rita Catholic School, that's in Dallas, which both girls attended, received texts from both Brooke and Blair, timestamped at 3:30 a.m., saying, "I love you." Their grandfather in Michigan also received a text, "Love you," with a picture of the girls.
Just heartbreaking. You know, they got out, they saved other families, and then he couldn't save his own kids and parents. I mean, it's just, and you guys, your family has a little bit of a connection to the St. Rita's. I believe that's where you guys,
that's where that's where I was born in Dallas, and then that's the church we attended.
Yeah.
But it's just the reason we bring all this up is just stop trying to turn everything into some cheap political shot that can help your side. Just stop and actually get facts. Actually spend some time understanding the situation. Don't listen to some uneducated fool like George Stephanopoulos or Dana Bash, who will do everything they can to try to twist the issue. That's not what happened in this case. So if you actually get the facts and the information, it's important to know exactly what happened. And it's important in New Mexico because we have flash flooding all the time. It's dangerous. And when you hear about flash flooding possible in your area, pay attention to it. When you get that warning on your phone, pay attention to it. Don't blow it off. It means something, especially when you have burn scars, where you have wildfires in New Mexico. It's a huge issue. So please don't fall for the cheap political tricks. Those people don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They care about power. They care about winning extra seats in Congress, and they care about lining whatever pockets they can line. And so I just hope this gives some perspective. And I know it's a lot to spend on one issue, and we've spent 45 minutes on it. And we're not going to get to that. We're going to do one other story. But I don't know. I just couldn't stand it. And that story's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's very hard. Well, I appreciate, Mark, I think people will appreciate the fact that you give some personal insight. Just the knowledge base on the weather side of things is important for people to actually be able to evaluate and make critical thinking decisions in times of crisis. And hopefully this area, once it recovers, will put systems in place. I mean, I did read that Trump said, I'm going to invest. He said it before this time,
right,
that they are investing in updated weather technologies and with NWS and NOAA.
NOAA.
NOAA, yeah. So that was part of the plan all along, and that is continuing to be a plan, and they are putting a timestamp on that, saying that they want to get that done. So.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing, if you want to hold Trump accountable, here's where I'm going to hold him accountable, which is how much money are you invested in weather modeling, and how much money are we as a country going to invest to make sure we have the best weather modeling in the world? Right now, the Europeans have the single best weather model in the world. We need to have the best weather modeling in the world. Like, that matters for situations like this. So, and what I mean by that is that the better your modeling is, the smaller you can pull down the grid to. In other words, you can look and say, okay, we're looking at the Texas Hill Country, and if we see a little weather disturbance, a small one, a tiny one, backing its way in with a lot of moisture, we know we can forecast that better. Versus when it's not as good, it's a bigger area, right? It's 50 square miles versus 10 square miles. We want to be down to a square mile eventually, right? We want to be able to look more and more. It's getting better and better. But I can't stand when you see people whose job it is to help keep their citizens safe try to pass the buck and try to turn this into a finger-pointing game of there's not enough staffing. They didn't tell us that it was going to be this exact amount of rain, stuff like that. Not fair. And it is not helpful, and it needs to be called out.
Okay. Well, something else is, we're just going to talk about one more story, as Mark said, that is making headlines today.
Yeah.
I think it's ridiculous, but I still wanted to bring it to everybody's attention if you haven't already heard this. But Elon Musk is going to start a new party, apparently, a new political party. He's going to call it the American Party.
Okay.
Now, just keep in mind, he has not actually filed any paperwork for this yet. But he is touting the fact that he's going to start this. Now, his goal, this is just a little poll quote. It says the world's wealthiest person, Elon Musk, and the country's biggest political donor, said on Saturday that he's going to create a new political party, which is an enormous and challenging undertaking that would test the billionaire's newfound influence on American politics. When it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy, Mr. Musk wrote on his X. Today, the American Party is formed to give you back your freedom. Mr. Musk, once a close ally of President Trump, who in recent weeks has repeatedly bickered with him, has actually not filed paperwork as of Saturday evening for the new party, though he added in a separate post that the American Party would be active in elections, quote, next year. No immediate signs suggest that Mr. Musk was working to establish his party quickly. Any new entity would be required to be disclosed to the Federal Elections Commission. So he's going to start this new party. My understanding is that his whole goal is to take up a few Senate seats and about 10 House seats. That's what he would be focusing on in the 26 midterms, okay? Yeah. So here's a little bit of Trump's. I'm not going to read the whole thing that Trump said because it's quite lengthy. But here's a little bit of what Trump had to say about this as of today. He says, I am saddened to watch Elon Musk go completely, quote, off the rails, essentially becoming a train wreck over the past 5 weeks. He even wants to start a third political party, despite the fact that has never succeeded in the United States. The system seems not designed for them. The one thing third parties are good for is the creation of complete and total disruption and chaos, and we have enough of that with the radical left Democrats who have lost their confidence and their minds. Republicans, on the other hand, are a smooth-running machine that has just passed the biggest bill of its kind in the history of our country, and it's a great bill. Blah, 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 blah. Basically, he goes on to say that Elon's mad about the EV mandate being removed from the bill, and he's upset about a friend of his not getting hired at NASA. Okay. So now let's actually find out if Elon Musk was to actually create this party, would there be enough people to join to make some impact on that? So let's take a listen to the latest CNN poll on this to see what would happen. Will this party actually grow?
Thing makes very little sense to me. It makes about as much sense as selling sand in the desert. What are we talking about here? What is the size of Elon Musk's base? Well, I calculate it to be about 4%, just 4%, 1, 2, 3, 4% of all voters. What is that base made up of? Well, it's those who view Elon Musk favorably and the GOP unfavorably. We're talking just about 4% of all voters out there, because it turns out most of the people who like Elon Musk already like the GOP already. That is, they already have a party for him. In my mind, there is just no base for Elon Musk's third party in the electorate, at least initially speaking.
All right. When we talk about...
Okay, so then Scott Pressler, who's big on getting people registered to vote across the country, he works pretty heavily in the state of Pennsylvania, quite frankly. That's kind of where I see most of his tweets coming from. But he just happened to tweet on this as well, and he said, well, if Republicans lose the House in 2026, which is the creation of a third party is likely to do, there'll be no budget for DHS and to deport criminal illegal aliens. We will likely lose 2028, and there goes control over the census. The border opens up again, and it was all for naught. So it's just like, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Like, I'm just curious, like, does Elon actually do this? Or is this just like a game that he is playing because he's a bit of a narcissist? Trump's a bit, they're all like, all this ego, inflated. Right. He mattered to the party initially. Is he just overreaching his power now by saying, I'm going to go out there and start this party? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, so a couple things. If you're a public figure that is non-political, okay? And I remember making this decision that we went back and forth and we talked about to Jay a lot about this, that the minute you become political, you create an environment which takes basically half the voters and pits them against you in this current environment. And so think about what Elon did, okay? He started out by going and backing Trump. Okay, so most Democrats go, I'm done with this guy, right? I don't like Trump, the normal political reaction. He then goes and gets in a fight with Trump and takes the other half. And Republicans go, what the heck is wrong with you, man? And then he does this. So what he's done is he's a man without a constituency because he's burned both sides of the political aisle. And so I don't think this is going to be a huge factor. While I can appreciate Scott's point, a couple of points here, a couple of points there can make a big difference in a very tight congressional race, and Elon could put a lot of money into it. But at a certain point, Elon's going to realize that constantly wading in political waters, it creates a massive problem for him. And I think it is. It's created problems for Tesla. It's created all sorts of issues. So you can either lock down on what you're doing and have a set of beliefs and say, these are my beliefs. But when you're the one who's floating around and you're kind of like, no, I like you. No, I don't like you. I like the EV mandates. I'm the EV guy. No, I'm not the EV guy. I'm Trump's guy. I'm not Trump's guy. I'm my own guy. I hate Trump. I hate the Democrats. I hate everybody. He's got nobody left. He's a man without a country at this point in the respect of a political constituency.
Right. And again, my understanding is a lot of the board members of his businesses were tired of him being so politically involved with Doge that they were like, you need to get back here and run your companies.
Right.
So it will be interesting to see what kind of feedback he gets from the board members of his companies after he's made this announcement over the weekend. I would be curious. I don't think that they're going to be very supportive of him starting this American party. I think it seems ego driven to me. It seems like my feelings are hurt. I'm going to show you how much power I have. And here I go. I don't know. It feels childish.
Yeah, and I will say the one thing that Harriet, and we cut it off before he got done, but he did say, so what's interesting is the most successful third-party candidate of our lifetimes is Ross Perot. Okay? The negative on Ross Perot, when he got into the race, 14% of Americans thought of him negatively. Right now, 58% of Americans think of Elon Musk negatively. It's devastating. I mean, I don't think he's going to build anything. I really don't.
Okay. All right. Well, I know those were some heavy topics today. We will.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We are going to have the best time on Wednesday. I want you to know that it's going to be. We're going to live it up out there.
We'll show it. We'll throw some game camera.
Well, I will have some game camera. I promise. I got a new camera. I got a new camera location I've set up.
Oh, geez.
So I'm hopeful that we'll get you something there.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us. We appreciate your comments. Please continue to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel if you're listening on the radio or someplace else.
And pray for everybody in Texas.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep all those folks and those that are still missing. I hope at the very least we can recover their bodies and give these families some closure that they desperately need. So thanks for listening. We hope you had a blessed 4th of July. We have a great country, and we appreciate everything that you guys do to support us here at the No Doubt About It podcast. Have a great rest of the week.
You've been listening to the No Doubt About It podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at No Doubt About It Podcast.
No doubt about it.
The No Doubt About It podcast is a Choose Adventure Media production. See you next time on No Doubt About It.
There is no doubt about it.